just get started here. So thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Denon from Communo, and I am currently at Communo headquarters here in Calgary. Looking at the people on the call right now, I recognize a few Communo members, so that's awesome to see. If you're not familiar with Communo, in a nutshell, we are basically a community of freelancers and agencies empowering the passion economy. So as you can see, we have our guest here for our first installment of our Communo Member Insights series. He is the owner of SINTR Motion Graphics and has over 20 years of experience, not to mention he's a Communo user. So this is Bryan Schaeffer. Just a little bit about SINTR. SINTR works with industry-leading organizations to help engage their employees and customers through video. But Bryan is definitely going to go more into that in his presentation. So just before we begin, I want to encourage everyone to use the chat feature. Maybe head out right now. I see some people saying where they're from. So I think everyone should just hop in there and tell us where you're from and kind of what you're expecting to get out of the webinar. We will have a question and answer period at the end. So ask all of your questions and Bryan will be more than happy to answer them. So I'm going to hand it off to Bryan now.
All right, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. This is a little new for me. We're all trying new things during this time. Got my webinar set up using some of the techniques I might talk about a little bit later. But a little bit of my background. SINTR is my studio, as Dan mentioned. I've been working, this is about the 10th year that I've been running this studio, and we've been working virtually from Seattle and now in Bozeman, Montana. And so my big transition about 4 years ago was moving from Seattle to Bozeman, and theoretically, being able to work anywhere. And I experienced a bit of growing pains doing that, which I'll talk to you guys about. You might be able to, many people might be able to relate to that with the current situation going on right now. But a little bit about my background. I was originally born in Southwest Montana. It's my first cross-country ski medal, and I ended up moving out to Washington to start my career. There wasn't an internet back then, and so there's limited options for what you could do in Montana as a creative person. So started climbing up mountains, skiing down mountains, crossing over mountains, growing my family, sharing these adventures and experiences. And those kind of outdoor experiences of planning and camaraderie and teamwork, I think there's a lot of similarities to the work we end up doing in the creative field, where there's challenging projects, but there's a lot of teamwork, a lot of skill, a lot of dedication, and just fun involved. I love challenges like that. So I think that has spurred us on to being able to collaborate in a way that Communo is doing now, something we've been doing for 20 years with select people, working with industry-leading companies and organizations on their key oftentimes essential messaging for their internal customers and clients. A lot of the most memorable projects I've worked on, and there will be a link that you can see after the presentation of some of these examples. We're not running video through this deck at this point, but we're regional campaigns for Space Needle, King 5, Boeing 100th anniversary celebration. The Puyallup Fair, a bunch of traditional advertising campaigns were really enjoyable and memorable to work on. And then about 5 years ago or so, with the development of mobile media and self-publishing, things started changing really quickly. And being able to connect audience with your message. Me being in a traditional background of advertising and media that was more through existing broadcast channels or live event channels, being able to do that on the social channels, I experimented on some side projects to kind of learn how this was going, because I could kind of see, what happened in the recording industry was definitely happening in media with the consolidation of media. Remember when iTunes took over, and then all these big recording companies were just having a really hard time until they could modify and change. So I saw that happening with media, especially broadcast media, and now it's happening with COVID going on as well. So highly disrupted market. With the allure and social channels to be able to connect with your audiences more directly and build engagement, definitely something that I was looking into. I started a decade ago, but along the way kind of wasn't very seamless, and have been doing a lot of research on side projects, creating media for online channels, apart from my corporate content, which was still going to be in live event media and internal media primarily. So in terms of external facing social media, trying to learn about how that all worked, and then if everybody goes out there and just did what they were doing from the broadcast and traditional standpoint, making animated banner ads and stuff, does that connect the same way on social? And then what is the result of everybody trying the same thing at once? You end up with a river of content streaming through that becomes really hard to stand out in. So even the last couple of years, it seemed like there's just these streams of content flowing through, and does it matter? Does it resonate with clients, with shareholders, with people invested in your brand, your company, or is it just a big mess of regurgitating content? So it felt like there's a big bender on the internet, and everybody was just spewing out stuff. And so I think now we have an opportunity to get a little bit of clarity and focus on what are we really about? What are our organizations about? What do we stand for as individual people? And what do our organizations that we work for stand for? And I think that's definitely becoming more and more rising to the top now. Something we can't just avoid anymore. I started my career as basically a tool of the agencies, and they owned all the connections. They owned employment agencies and advertising agencies, and you were a tool that would work within there. And so you wouldn't really do anything like self-promotion or talking with clients directly if you're in a creative capacity in terms of new business. And now it's like flipped on its head, and everyone is expected to do that. So the biggest challenge for me, and this is the same for a lot of you, is I'm a trained creative with 20 years of experience. And the last 5, I've had to learn how to do business development without the support of an agency, without a marketing team, and interviewing, asking other Communo members, other people, what their experiences and insights are, and how I can connect with audiences with my skill set. So being able to focus on that, have some clarity, and before start making stuff, thinking about, well, why should I be making content? What is it going to do to improve people's lives, to use my skill set in a way that's beneficial in the marketplace? And obviously the people have been talking about doing that is telling stories, brand stories, that sort of thing. And so I got a story here I'd like to share about kind of coming back to Montana, back to my roots, and some discoveries that I made on kind of branding and direct social media engagement. So a few years ago, some friends and I went down to a brewery, and this was in Edmonds in Washington, still living there. And we accidentally double hopped a IPA batch, self-brewing kind of kit. And then it turned out really cool, but we thought, well, we should make a label for it and make a name. So we called it jokingly, the Drunken Sailor, made a name, made a label. And then we couldn't just stop there. We actually made a 30-second, basically TV spot for it. We filmed and rotoscoped and motion tracked and animated this thing, animating on the bottle, and just had too much fun with it. And you'll be able to see the clip on the link that we give you later. And yeah, no one was actually drunk in it. It was just got really good actors. What ended up happening out of it though is I thought, well, maybe I'll sell some T-shirts with this or something, and nothing happened. It was just a fun thing that we did with some friends. Then started put it on a website, kind of disappeared, collected digital dust, I guess. And then a few years ago, I ran into a close childhood friend from Montana on the streets in Seattle, which was unusual. You usually run into people in Montana that you know, but not so much in big city. Anyway, she said her husband had been a brewmaster in Seattle and recently in Australia, and they were looking for, you know, kind of a local Montana person, or at least Montana roots person, to do the branding for their new brewery. And so I said, okay, well, you should check out this thing I did for the Drunken Sailor, kind of as a joke. But what ended up happening is they ended up hiring me to do the branding and positioning for the whole brewery. So this is Beaverhead Rock. It was discovered by Lewis and Clark on the way, you know, on their journey out to the Pacific Northwest, and it's iconic area piece in the area. So did an illustration of that, developed logo, branding, the crest, responsive website, and collateral materials, and for all the different pieces. I don't normally do a lot of brand building these days, but that's not normally established by the clients by the time clients get to me. But to cap it all off and making a video, which you guys will see later. And it was like a little couple-minute piece interviewing the brewmaster and getting some B-roll footage and putting together a little weekend in Dillon, Montana, and what that place is about and what's the history of brewing in the area, how they originally started in the 1800s before all of it in Montana was shut down by the Prohibition. And then it reemerged, you know, basically in the last decade or so, and now it's just thriving here and many places in the Northwest. And what ended up happening was I normally will do a video review page on Vimeo, and it's a private, you know, and then I'll go in and the clients will do edits, and I'll do a round of edits and then do a next version and then clean it up. So I gave them the review link, and the next thing I know, my wife said, "Hey, I saw your video on Facebook." And I thought, "Oh man, what? You know, it's not done yet." And they had taken the video, their marketing person, and just directly uploaded it to Facebook. And normally I think, oh no, I'd be embarrassed because I hadn't gone through polishing it all up and, you know, finished the sound design and finished, you know, coloring, whatever else. But what ended up happening was, you know, overnight there were 6,500 views and 11,000 views of the video by the weekend. And the county only has 5,000 people. So I was thinking, what the heck is going on with this? Like, how was this, you know, so successful? And I realized that traditional media has its place, but when you're looking at social engagement and online distribution like this, it's really about more of an authentic story and being able to connect. And they already had a strong, you know, brewers organization, different kind of network online. And to be able to have this piece that's a video, it basically emphasized or restated in a new way what they had already been talking with their base about. But it was kind of more of like a reveal than something that looked like it was fabricated from an advertising agency. So that was, you know, really an eye-opener to me in terms of the tone and manner for creating video content for different social channels. So I think it comes down to, you know, clarity of message and the tone. I guess can't overstate this enough. The tone is super important for creating content online, especially when you're representing your organization. You know, it can really be a strong advocate for you, or it can backfire. So you got to be really careful about that. So that's why I think it's worth exploring a lot of positioning and a lot of, you know, what am I about before you even start thinking about what techniques you want to use to share your message. And then you get, well, then there are techniques to share in storytelling and to make your living visual brand language come to life. And there's a lot of nuance to that. So it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly and should have a lot of kind of research and a lot of thought put into it before you start going into production. So after all of this, you know, 10 years of me trying different things and flailing what it felt like as my side projects in social media, recently, I think I should have come across this sooner, but I'm a little slow on the uptake here. The secret, to actually connect with audiences online should have been pretty obvious, and that's that you give away all your secrets. So I've been following Andrew Kramer for 15 years, probably helped develop my career as someone I've never met more than anyone else. He does After Effects tutorials. And so I went in, I was shifting in like the 5th time in my career to shift from a print designer to a presentation designer, from Flash to After Effects. I was learning motion graphics. And he came along and kind of disrupted the whole field where they were all boring tutorials with bad artwork. And he actually was showing, this is stuff you can do, and this is how I do it for Hollywood movies. This is how I do this stuff at a really high level. And then he would give you files that you can work with and hundreds of tutorials. So I did all, 150 tutorials with Andrew Kramer virtually. And now I buy his products, and I use his plugins, and that's helped grow my business. And more recently, you have people like Peter McKinnon in the middle, Canadian guy, you guys might recognize him, doing a bang up job on YouTube as an influencer and a cinematographer, basically showing people how to do cinematic tricks and kind of build engagement that way. And then the next one with the future, they're really trying to reinvent education for design and build a really large following of like 1 billion members for people to be able to learn online and develop their design businesses that way. So these people have all been really influential on how they're not only giving their secrets away, they're putting it on the widest broadcast network possible in doing different videos, different classes, things like that for free, and then with paid content to help spread their messages. And they become experts, and you follow them, and eventually end up purchasing from them, or they use their influence to get projects, that sort of thing. So ton of work, but that's the background. And as things shifted, we used to start with a semi-truckload full of gear and load in and out to do video shoots. And now, we can pack around a couple duffel bags and go with a fast and light kit, which some of it I'm actually using to film this webinar with, my Sony A7R II camera and a little H1N microphone with a lav on it, really inexpensive. But things like that can help, at least for online, build some tools that are really helpful to get to a certain quality level. So quality level is something that I could spend a lot of time talking about. I just want to give you guys some basic ideas. Online, I think the most important thing is going to be sound quality. So hopefully I sound good here. People won't tolerate really loud or echoey rooms or blown out sound. They'll tolerate a little bit bad picture better than they'll tolerate, the sound not working. I think the most important thing, as we talked about before, is clarity of message. Like, what are you sharing? And then that kind of drives all of the creative into what sort of different types of production you would use for that message, and where is the audience? And then while you're doing it, building your own network for distribution. So the video link you'll see in this one will be, I would recommend everyone, if they haven't watched it, watch 110-100. It's by the video platform Wistia. And they had a $1,000 budget to do an ad for a software company, $10,000 budget, and $100,000 budget. And they're basically showing, with the same creative director, what is the creative process to do that, and then what can you get for each of those budgets. And it's pretty amazing. One of the links I have actually shows you what the finished clips look like. And then there's a series that you can see as they're developing that, what sort of considerations are made to match those different budgets. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, but you kind of get what you pay for. And there is a place for kind of lower production for some of the social media content that you have to generally create. Otherwise, creating higher level content, higher level production in a series that then you chop up and distribute later is another great technique involved in that. So in this age of platforms, what I am attempting to do for myself, which I thought if I can do it, then I can show other people how to do it, is building my own platform using Creative Cloud, Dropbox, Vimeo, Zoom, Google Hangouts, HubSpot, and using the established platforms like Facebook, LinkedIn. I don't really do Twitter, and Instagram to be a lead kind of generation advertising funnel. But I don't keep all of my real core content there because it's a stream of consciousness. The stuff comes and goes and just kind of disappears. So building your own website and blog, in this case, I switched over to HubSpot to manage that, will be where my platform lives. And a lot of larger organizations do this, but I just became aware in the last 2 years that smaller ones can start doing this as well and really benefit from some of the techniques that larger organizations already do extremely well in building their platforms, creating their content structure that then becomes an educational resource for the brand as they move forward. So that's the beginning and the end of my presentation. There's a lot of technical pieces that we're going to be creating and releasing videos on our blog and website that will show you how to set up a remote camera for doing voiceover, how to think about when to use live action, when to use motion graphics, when to do a combination of those things. How do you create video when you can't go and film? Those are all things that we've all had to deal with in the last couple months and longer in some cases. And so I'd encourage all of you to go and follow on LinkedIn. Is going to be a place where I'll be posting weekly videos. And then all of this is going to live on my blog. So at some point you could go in there and binge watch a bunch of things to get up to speed on a certain technique or a certain process. But that's a little bit of my background. I think it's really great that folks are able to reach out remotely and really gather skill sets that aren't geographic specific anymore, more about where true collaborations can exist. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about what Communo is doing, and I'm looking forward to the next steps and answering any of the questions you guys have.
That was great. So as Bryan mentioned, we did a little page for all of you to be able to go to and see the resources that he had in his presentation, such as the videos that he wasn't able to show and just a little more in depth. So there should be an offer on all of your screens right now. So you guys can click on that and it'll take you directly to Bryan's website. So if everyone could go ahead right now and put in any questions they might have in the Q&A, that would be great. I have one for myself. You kind of talked about being authentic and telling your true story and finding in your own niche. So I was just curious as to what does a successful project look like for you?
Well, a lot of the big successful projects I do are all internal media in terms of from a commercial standpoint. And I do a lot of work with some industry leading software companies, biotech companies, and the Department of Defense in the United States. So a lot of them, it's like, they're amazing. They did these great things and I can't tell you about them. But I think a lot of the stuff is complex messages need to also be taken, if they're important, they need to be taken with, a bit of love and care in terms of how do you present that to your audience like you actually, care about it more than just putting out a white page, something like that. So the bulk of the work that we do is it's a complex idea or it's a new product that doesn't even exist yet. It's being developed. And with motion graphics, we're able to really iterate and do things with script and do things with content that develops faster and evolves more than you can with traditional live action, where you have to have it all set and then you go and film, and then that's kind of what you get, So those are more testimonial based kind of after the fact maybe, but for if you're doing more like new product and more innovation for products and also different sort of campaigns in terms of thought leadership, those can benefit a lot from doing motion graphics projects. In terms of some of the favorite projects I've worked on over the years that have had the most impact, there's quite a few of them. The most recent one is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We traveled down into Beijing, was that last year? To launch the Reinvented Toilet project. So we were working with a team of people that have been recruited from all over the globe, really. And the team and I out of Seattle worked together to create the widescreen graphics, kind of the press set for Bill Gates, and then the background graphics and theme graphics that end up being virtual, digital, and also printed graphics for the event. And then enabling platforms for social leaders that are actually, like clean water and sewage advocates in different parts of the world, to let them tell their stories and why this is such an important thing. So things like that where you really can drive social change are probably the most impactful and inspiring to me. And that's why I do it. It's like seeing my clients being able to take their business and franchise it, or, hit from that certain billions of dollars to the next billions of dollars, whatever their milestones are, down to local brewery being able to kind of represent the region, those sort of things. So yeah, long answer. Any other questions?
A question from Tim Lewis. He said, for Montana, budget seems to be the biggest criteria for a lot of businesses. How do you get clients to value your work enough to pay you a substantial wage?
That's a good question. So I did a creative director class several years ago with Larry Asher in School of Visual Concepts in Seattle. And he said, once you get to a certain point of your career where you have your skill set really developed, then you need to develop what clients you're working for. And how to tell if they're a good client that has a budget is go to their building. If they have a nice building that's, well situated and it's in a good location and it's, the windows are clean and they've got, a lot of space and it's they're paying a mortgage or they're paying a lease for that at least, and they have budgets. So you can't, the way that you price all projects, and this is kind of going back to blur ends, but you price the client. And so projects, I will work on a couple projects every year for things that are more altruistic. Like this past year, we did one for a kind of a homeless outreach in Seattle, an animated piece. And we'll do that either as a complete donation or at cost. And so part of your positioning is figuring out, well, who are you working with and for? What are your budgets? In my case, I'm never going to cut quality to cut budget. So that's just something we won't do. But if some things we really believe about, we will do 1 or 2 projects a year as a donation. But otherwise, yeah, you find the clients that have the money, and then you just need to figure out how to inform them why you're the best choice.
All right, awesome. So we have a question from Macy. Have you noticed any major trends that have emerged with COVID that you are planning to utilize?
It's funny that so I had kind of started self-isolating 4 years ago when by moving to Montana, right, and building my studio here, and being able to work remotely was important to me because I thought if anything ever happened while I was working in a bigger agency, then the agencies I was at, they weren't able to handle it at that point. This was several years ago, but I thought, well, some earthquake or some natural disaster happens. How am I going to be able to keep working? And so being able to work remotely, high-speed internet, all those things were things that I thought was important a while ago. And it's interesting now that with COVID going on, that's just been really reinforced. The other big thing that I thought was interesting is doing all the live event work 20 years ago. they're spending millions of dollars in some cases to fly key shareholders and sales folks to certain locations just to be in a physical location together. And I thought, once broadband internet comes along, this is like in 2001 or something, like I'm sure this whole industry is going to, change. And it didn't. It got stronger. Live events became bigger and bigger and bigger and more prevalent because people will want to be in touch with each other. They want to be in physical space. So I think right now what we're doing with webinars, I would rather be honestly in front of an audience of all of you so I could see you, But on the other hand, I probably wouldn't have met a lot of you folks, especially in Canada, that if this wasn't the case. So I think it's going to change things a lot. It's going to definitely feel a lot more like a science fiction novel, like the one I read in college, He, She, and It. You guys should read that. That's basically predicting the future on a lot of this stuff that's happening now. They're talking about in science fiction novels. But it does, I guess the biggest outcome out of this is it's going to force people to be more remote while being more connected.
Totally. We have time for a few more questions here. So David asked, do you think specialization is still important?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, that's one of I think the biggest challenges with Communo is the basic area where you find jobs. It's basically, I'm all competing for a certain job, whereas I would rather be sought out for a certain discipline for ongoing relationship. So if you're doing one-off projects here and there, then you're more in a Fiverr situation, and then it's a race to the bottom. So like with what Bryans talks about with, differentiation and specialization and people going from a larger demographic area to search you out. So it's not so much location specific. That means that you have a niche if you're doing that, right? So I think that is incredibly important in some of these areas, especially the live event world. That's been, and broadcast is being disrupted quite a bit because there's a lot more consolidation of studio space and virtual studios that are happening. So I think probably using the connections you have to figure out where there are opportunities in the big challenge now is, like, honestly, if you want to do something new, you have to demonstrate to people that you're doing it, even if it's a test. You can't say, I got this great idea. Like, everyone's got great ideas, show me it. So, I do a lot of prototyping and a lot of that kind of outreach, and you might not get results right away, but I think it's something where you have to constantly be trying new things and connecting with your network and demonstrating that. And that's where, folks like Andrew Kramer and people like that have really, really thrived. And it's not going to be the same for everybody, but I think there's no other choice. You have to do it now.
Great. So I think we just have our time for one more question here. Warren asked, in a world so convoluted with messaging, what's your best tip for staying authentic?
I think what you have to do is talk to other people and get their perspective on who you are. So for me, for a long time, I thought, well, I'm this kind of young outdoorsy guy that does this and that. And, I was talking to local photographers and other people in the space, and they said, no, you're just like this middle-aged tech geek. So who you're really seen as, you're a technology guy. And I thought, wow, so you basically, you don't really position yourself. You kind of have it done for you, but you have to also look at, well, who am I okay being with, being about myself? And I think you just need to talk to a lot of people, like really ask them, like, in my business, what is my business persona? I hear the word personal branding a lot, and I think of it more as a persona. Like, this isn't you entirely as a person, but it's a part of you as a person that has to represent a certain thing. So I'm making some spoof videos of me interviewing myself with two personas. One is the outdoor guy and one is the tech geek guy, just to kind of sort those out and then show how those kind of could work in different marketplaces. But it's nonetheless, it's a fascinating exploration into, what you kind of become as a personal brand and what you represent and how you can then connect to your audiences that way. And I think it just takes interview people, ask them, what do you think about this or that? Get a lot of feedback, and not just from a few people, from as many as you can, and then filter out the worst and the best and use something in the middle.
Great. And you know what? I think we'll just do one more question because it just came in from Joel. He asked, is it vital to have your own firm when getting paid as a freelancer, or does it differ from country to country?
That's a really good question. I think it's a lot of work to build your own firm. And these days anymore, a company name isn't so important. It's really, a lot of folks are really like their name, I have a company named SINTR because I have a team of people that basically SINTRs ideas together, and we work in that way. But people probably would hire Bryan. They wouldn't hire SINTR so much, right? At least not yet. The big challenge is if you are trying to go out and grow your business, you have to figure out how to make these connections to align with other like-minded people to build that. Like Seth Godin says, be a linchpin. And I think there's more opportunity if you are independent doing that. You definitely can get more collaboration in an organization. But for me, I'm just a solopreneur. I've always been kind of wanted to be out in my own terms, to be able to develop things that I see are important as fast as I can, but then getting the feedback from people around that, is this a good idea or not a good idea? That sort of thing. But be part of a network one way or the other, because we're only limited by our own imagination, creativity, and our network.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Bryan, and to everyone who joined, Communo members and others. We have so many more events coming up, so if you're interested in attending any more, be sure to check out our socials and on our Communo platform. For anybody who is not a Communo member on the call, I'll just put a little link here in the chat box, and you can go ahead and sign up right there for a free account. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Bryan. I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone else did as well. Hopefully we'll hear from you soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if anyone else has more questions, LinkedIn's probably the best place to reach out, and I'd be happy to help out where I can. So thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody.